Welcome back, everyone. The Prophet of Islam was a man on a mission. Muhammad said, "I have been ordered by Allah to fight against the people until they testify that none has the right to be worshipped but Allah, and that Muhammad is Allah's messenger, and offer the prayers perfectly and give the obligatory charity. So if they perform that, then they save their lives and property from me, except for Islamic laws, and then their reckoning accounts will be done by Allah." Assuming this wasn't another satanic voice that Muhammad misidentified as a message from Allah, hey, it happens. The God of Islam, who is definitely not Satan, commanded Muhammad to fight people until they became Muslims or submitted. I know you're hearing that little voice in your head. Islam means peace. That is nonsense. While some, especially in Western circles, may argue that the term Islam means peace, this is untrue. There is no indication anywhere in the early Islamic texts that the term was ever used to convey that notion. Islam refers to the act of submitting. You can willingly submit to Allah and His jihad-obsessed prophet, or you can be submitted if the Islamic State is powerful enough to win the wars they wage. Yes, there was a time in history when that was possible, believe it or not. Anyway, the Islamists wage jihad to the extent they can. If they're victorious, options for the defeated include being killed, converting to Islam, or maybe you'll be a dhimmi. A dhimmi, pronounced dhimmi, is someone in a place conquered by Muslims who does not convert to Islam but lives as a lower-class, disgraced citizen and pays the Islamic State lots of money not to be killed. That's my definition, and more accurate than any you'll get from a Muslim apologist. The great and sainted Caliph Umar shows us these options well. As he moved his military campaigns northward in the mid-630s, he issued these marching orders. "Summon the people to God. Those who responded to your call accept it from them, but those who refuse must pay the poll tax out of humiliation and lowliness. If they refuse this, it is the sword without leniency. Your choices are clear. Be killed by members of the religion of peace, convert to the religion of peace, or live as a disgraced dhimmi under the rule of the religion of peace." Now, if you want conclusive proof that the religion of Islam was formed by a bunch of misogynistic barbarians, all you have to do is ask, in just about any given situation, what about the women? So let's ask, how do non-Muslim women fare under the tender mercies of the Islamic State? Dr. Mark Dury is one scholar who has done a lot of research in this area, and he comments, "There are countless references to actual abduction and rape of non-Muslim women and girls, as well as to the fear of this in sources documenting the history of dhimmi communities. This history continues in the modern period, for example, going back to 2014, where ISIS managed relations with non-Muslim women in Islamic State-controlled territories by giving them a status called dhimma, which literally means protection. Since the beginning of Islam, non-Muslims have been considered dhimmis, literally protected residents, but within the Islamic State's theological system, dhimmi women can be used for man's sexual pleasure or sold on the female slave market. In past videos, we've seen how the lives of Muslim women under Sharia law are not so good. In this video so far, we've seen that the lives of dhimmis under the Islamic State are even worse. The lives of female dhimmis, specifically, are even worse than worse. Yet, there is a still greater category of misery under the rule of Islam that I want to focus on for the rest of this video, namely women taken as war captives. According to Sharia law, when a child or a woman is taken captive, they become slaves by the fact of capture, and the woman's previous marriage is immediately annulled. Islamic law is dedicated to making captive girls and women sexually available for Muslim men, and if sacred Islamic law didn't annul the marriage of those female captives, then jihadis would be adulterers. So you declare the female captives single slaves. That's quite a convenient loophole Allah has made for His men. So female captives become the legal property of Muslim men and are sexually available. And that's the meaning of verses like these from the Quran. "And also forbidden to you are married women," because that would be adultery, "except what your right hands own. The believers have prospered who guard their private parts, except from their wives or what their right hands own." Muhammad's example demonstrates this well. He did guard his private parts, except from his many wives, as well as the women that he rightfully owned. Meet Safiya bint Hayy, a captive from one of Muhammad's wars against the Jews. Muhammad went on an expedition to Khaybar, took it by force, and there were gathered the prisoners of war. When Muhammad saw her, the beautiful Safiya bint Hayy, he said, "Take any other woman from among the prisoners." Then Muhammad granted her freedom, and then married her. On the way, Sulaim embellished her, and then sent her to him, that is, Muhammad, at night. Allah's apostle appeared as a bridegroom in the morning. There is a plot twist, as many of you know. Muhammad had not treated his prospective in-laws particularly well. He killed Safiya's father a few years before. Also, he tortured and killed her husband. When she and another woman were being brought to Muhammad by one of his servants, just imagine this gruesome scene. Muhammad said to Bilal when he saw this Jewess behaving in that way, that is, she was shrieking in horror when passing her dead husband, "Had you no compassion, Bilal, when you brought two women past their dead husbands?" Muhammad had just killed Safiya's family, was about to sleep with her because she was definitely in the mood, and criticized his servant for lack of compassion when walking these women past the dead bodies of their husbands. That makes sense. By the way, here's a pro tip. Sleeping with a woman whose family you just killed could be risky, but Muhammad's men were on top of that, so he could be on top of her. While Muhammad was lying with Safiya, one of his men, named Abu Ayyub, stayed the night at his door. When he saw the Prophet in the morning, he said, "God is the greatest." He had a sword with him. He said to the Prophet, "O Messenger of God, this young woman has just been married, and you killed her father, her brother, and her husband. So I did not trust her not to harm you." Out of all of this, it was the woman who could not be trusted. Muhammad's example is further apparent in many accounts where his men sleep with captive women with Muhammad and Allah's explicit approval. Sometimes their only hesitation was that some of the women had pagan husbands. Fortunately, Allah had a verse from the Quran waiting, which you know from earlier in the video. Some of the companions of Muhammad were reluctant to have relations with the female captives because of their pagan husbands. So Allah the Exalted sent down the Quranic verse, "And all married women are forbidden unto you, save those captives whom your right hand possess." Out of all of the options of people generally, and women specifically, under Islamic law, female war captives have especially abysmal prospects. All of this is quite clear, almost simple enough for a BBC reporter to understand. And yes, this stuff is still happening. We heard about ISIS earlier. Let's return to 2014, focusing specifically on war captives. This is from CNN. The idea that ISIS is kidnapping, selling, and raping women and children is hardly surprising. Many such accounts have surfaced. Since the group began its often brutal run through Syria and Iraq, including chilling stories from members of the Yazidi religious minority. Even then, it's rare to see its rationale laid out as plainly as in the question and answers on female slaves and their freedom. This article then gives some quotes from that document. If she was a virgin, the owner can have intercourse with her immediately after the ownership is fulfilled. If she was not a virgin, her uterus must be purified, that is, wait for a period to be sure she isn't pregnant. The waiting period is necessary in Islamic law because in spite of all of Islam's miraculous scientific miracleness, that's the only way that Allah could figure out whether or not a woman was pregnant. As to girls, it's permissible to have intercourse with a female slave who hasn't reached puberty if she is fit for intercourse, the document reads. However, if she is not fit for intercourse, the owner can only enjoy her without intercourse. The Q&A is clear that young and old, the captors have full control of their captives. As such, the ISIS document claims it is permissible to buy, sell, or give as a gift female captives and slaves, for they are merely property. Women as property. What's that remind you of? Muslims, we keep going back to your prophet. Muhammad admired Ibraim, who was fair-skinned and beautiful. He used to visit her and order her to veil herself, but he had intercourse with her by virtue of her being his property. Maybe that's where ISIS got it from. And the reports that we're hearing now about the treatment of women by Hamas sound all too familiar. Witnesses to the aftermath of the Hamas carnage describe finding a woman who was shot in the back of her head, lying on her bed, naked from her waist down. A live grenade was planted in her hand. She had nails and different objects in her female organs. Her body was brutalized in a way that was unrecognizable. There were girls with broken pelvis due to repetitive rapes. Their legs were split wide apart. Others saw several female soldiers who were shot in intimate parts. There seemed to be a systematic genital mutilation of a group of victims. One Knesset member believes that Hamas did this to humiliate Israel. Another recent article from the Associated Press described a woman being gang raped on the ground. What follows is an extremely graphic description. You can pause the video and read that if you have the stomach for it. And not surprisingly, hostages who are now being released by Hamas describe sexual assault, perhaps surprisingly, even to men. Multiple freed hostages have confirmed what Aviva Siegel said, that sexual assault is occurring in the Hamas terror tunnels. And with current events, it's increasingly difficult to reflect on the vile religion of Islam without also reflecting on the sheer stupidity of so many people in the West. I ridiculed this video when it first came out. Let's pause and ridicule it again. Do you remember when the Hamas terror tunnels weren't so bad? I mean, shampoo.
Right, you're talking about tunnels. We know these tunnels have ventilation. We know that they've been known to have air conditioning. This has all been reporting that we've heard from the Israelis over the years. But the fact that she's saying she was held underground for more than 2 weeks, that there was shampoo, there was antibiotics, there was a guard per hostage in the experience she had, it is pretty stunning, because you've got to contrast that with what's happening above the ground, right? Where there isn't water, never mind shampoo.
As the reports of Islamic terrorism continue to emerge, many simply can't comprehend what makes these human beings, such as they are, act this way. Many in the West will, perhaps intentionally, let the answer forever elude them. Here's my take. You have the Quran, which says men own women, can multiply ownership of them for sexual pleasure, allows intercourse with prepubescent girls, allows men to strike women, and so forth. In other sources, like the Hadith and Sirah, the sex drive of Islam's prophet is celebrated, and the vile treatment of women is sanctioned by Muhammad. In short, the Islamic text can inspire men to be some of the worst people to ever walk the face of the earth. And then, under Islamic law, some of the worst men on earth acquire women. Finding themselves in a position of power over the vulnerable, they show us what unharnessed evil looks like as they do the devil's will. Whether or not the Islamic texts call for or sanction all of these specific actions of groups like Hamas, following Muhammad's example creates monsters, as well as a system where these monsters feast on their human prey, the spoils of war. Create some of the worst people on earth, give them someone vulnerable, and see what happens. That's what we're witnessing when we see women victimized by Islamic terrorism. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.